Welcome to Run With It, Canada's running fitness and health program, and I'm excited to have as my guest co-host Tim James. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be back. I appreciate this. It's been a few years since we've done this. Of course, lots has changed in the world, but excited to be back.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, I've had a great holiday. Very relaxing. Had some time off. So saw the family and feeling rested and ready for 2023.
Yes, and speaking of, what are some New Year's resolutions?
I've got the half marathon May 7th. That's marked down on my calendar, the BMO half marathon. So I'll be running that. And this is the first one that I've done in a few years for a few reasons. I haven't been running as much, but getting back into it. And also I'm excited because it'll be the first half marathon for my wife as well. So I'm excited to help guide her along in that way.
Oh, that's great. And I have the Sun Run coming up, and that's on April 16th. And no matter what we're doing, whether it's snowshoeing or if it's your first half marathon or the Sun Run, as I said, it's good to be active, right? And we have a segment coming up which talks about sticking to your goals.
Absolutely. And I have, a few of those goals. And I think that's such a big thing too, as I was recovering from an injury. And so one of the big things to get back into it is to set those goals, to actually mark down May 7th in your calendar. That's when you're going to run the half marathon or the Sun Run or whatever it might be. So I think setting some of those goals, that's a big thing to actually get back into it.
Yes. And speaking of injuries, I had a fall. But back to it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I've dealt with an injury as well. It was a few years ago that I was involved in the Columbia Icefield bus rollovers. So for people that are familiar with that story, there was a bus. It was a beautiful sunny day in Alberta, and that bus rolled down the mountain. And I survived. Not everyone did, but unfortunately, I had a few injuries to overcome. And so at that time of the crash, I think I was perhaps in the best fitness of my life. I was feeling good. And there are photos from just before the crash that I'm looking in great shape, and then all of that is derailed. It was a head injury, it was physical injuries, and then having to come back. But finally here, we're setting these goals, and with the world kind of opening up, with COVID not as much of a concern as before, we're starting to see these big events come back. So I'm excited to go back and do that BMO half marathon, to run it for the first time in a few years, and also to show that I have recovered in many ways from that crash.
Yes, you're an inspiration, Tim. And so we do have Dr. Bob Weil coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm interested to hear his perspective as well on things. So let's see what he has.
Welcome back, Dr. Bob.
Christine, it's great to be with you. Happy holidays, right, to everybody. I still had to put my Halloween costume away and everything, but it's always great to be with you guys, share some good insight, and the importance of ankle strength is one of them.
Yes, and you have an article, Universal Exercises, whatever the sport. What an interesting article and, wealth of information. So why do you think we think of exercising our upper body or lower body, but we tend, generally speaking, to forget to do our ankles. And why is that?
It's interesting. Sometimes we used to feel in podiatry that the feet were out of sight, out of mind. But there isn't really a sport, regardless of what it is, at whatever level, where we don't see the most common problem being ankle injuries. And it's a weak link sometimes. So what we try to do is, instead of paying attention many times with how much the athlete could bench press or how much they're doing for their biceps and upper body, we want them to include strengthening the ankles as a routine part of their exercise routine. It's for runners. Again, it's really, really important, as it is for soccer players, tennis players, skaters, etc. The ankle's a complicated joint. It allows us to absorb shock, terms that all runners are familiar with, pronation and supination, the ability of the foot to absorb impact, the ability of the foot to shape to the surface. Imagine yourself walking or running barefoot on the grass. Pronation allows your foot to shape to the terrain, and there's internal rotation of the whole leg that's part of that shock-absorbing mechanism. And once you bear weight, that changes to the term called supination, where the foot lines up like a lever to push us off. And the ankle is one of the main ingredients in having stability and motion control in all of those different directions. So we are talking about these essential exercises, and I add the strengthening of balance coordination in that article also, when we talk about the 2 essential exercise concepts. Again, no matter what your age or your son or daughter's age, whatever their sport, whatever their level, whatever your level, strengthening your feet and ankles. Rubber bands are a great way to do it. Balancing on unstable surfaces like tilt boards and the Bosu and the sand dune, great ways to work stability. And the second, again, is the idea of working on balance and being able to imagine yourself standing on one foot, closing your eyes and finding out where you are in space. So the fact that ankles, again, are the number one injury that we see in all sorts of activities, that they become a real problem for many individuals, chronic ankle instability. The ligaments of the ankle are more like taffy than rubber. So once they're strained and stretched and irritated, we start seeing that they lose some of their stabilizing power and mechanism. So we want this to be included. And today we've come a long way. As far as this inclusion is concerned, many athletic trainers, many team sports physicians absolutely include this type of strengthening. And again, runners, where you are many times on unstable surfaces, let alone running on trails or uneven surfaces, ankle concern is a big deal.
Boy, Dr. BobWeil is an expert. He talks about, proper footwear to, recovery and sticking to your goals. And what else? We're talking about health theme this month for January. How to stay healthy despite going through a separation. And Candace Sampson gives us some tips on it. So check this out.
I'm excited to have with me today Canadian TV and radio personality, Candace Sampson. She's a lifestyle and travel writer for Life in Pleasantville. She's also the owner and host of What She Said Talk, which is a popular show. And I want to welcome you today to talk about your show, but also about protecting your health while going through separation and a divorce. And I'm so excited to have you with me today, Candace. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So tell us about your podcast. Like it's on radio. It's airing on 105.9 the region and Pulse FM and Spotify all over. So
I'm everywhere. But for most people who don't live in the regions that it airs on the radio, you can catch it on podcast every week. I put it up after it airs on the radio. So it's always there to listen to. And it's a very women-centric, feminist-leaning podcast that covers just about every topic, but always through a woman's perspective. So it's my little happy place.
Yes, and it's such a great show. I mean, you cover hot topics like, clearing clutter. You have clutter in the house, how to declutter. In other words, you've got mental health, fitness, and you've had guests like Erica M on your show.
Yeah, and actually, I had the first man in 2022 to make an appearance was Brian Baumler, and I was happy to give him a spot because he was speaking about men's mental health. And I don't feature men a lot on my show because I feel that women need a place to have their voices amplified. But I think it's important to know that our counterparts, our partners, the men in our life that we love, they need good mental health as well. So I was happy to give him that spot around Father's Day. So that was kind of fun.
Yes, you have a great vehicle, a great platform, many platforms. And so the title, What She Said Talk, how did you come up with it?
Well, it actually wasn't mine. I wish I could say it was mine, but I was the travel expert for 3 years on What She Said. And Kate Wheeler and Christine Bentley were the owners, and they wanted to get out of it and retire, as one does. We want to move on to a bit other things. And they asked me if I was interested in buying it. I said yes, but I was going through a very contentious divorce at the time, and I couldn't just, give a lump sum. So Kate and Christine were kind enough to allow me to give monthly payments. And then the pandemic hit, worst timing ever. And in one of these lovely stories that I like to share about the power of community and the power of, aligning with strong, powerful women, Kate Wheeler called me up sort of halfway through my payments and said, we're done. We're done. You don't have to pay me anymore. And I broke down crying on the phone because she knew how much pressure I was under financially from my divorce, and obviously with the pandemic and sponsorship dollars drying up. And it was just such a wonderful, kind thing to do. So anyway, that's how I ended up with What She Said. And it's a very near and dear to my heart to own the show and to amplify women's voices across Canada. That's all I'm sort of here for.
Yes. And is it weekly?
It's a weekly show. It's a lot of work. I find all the guests. I just get everything set up, write all the introductions, get all the social media out. It's a big job. But my goal is to grow it coast to coast, and we'll see where it goes. I'm determined.
Yes. Congratulations. And
thank you.
I want to talk to you about how to protect your health while going through divorce and separation. Can you tell the viewers and the listeners your experience rather in tips? And I would just like you to, because I don't know how it must be. So difficult. I can't even imagine. So please tell us.
Yeah, I think divorce is, physiologically one of the most stressful times a woman can go through. I had a woman on my show who did a documentary recently about called Broken Vows, Breaking the Silence, and Sunny, and she talked about that. And it's true, divorce is very stressful, and it takes a lot out of you. And I think that when you're first going into it, there's a number of steps you should take to protect your mental health right out of the gate. Because even if it starts out amicable, it doesn't always end that way. So it's a really good idea to just protect your physical and mental health right away. And I think before anybody should even go to a lawyer, the very first thing you should do is get a therapist. And I recommend that for everybody.
Yes, because it can really be the mediator or just someone to listen to, right? That can guide you. And
and oftentimes we get a lawyer and we think, they're our best friends until you get your first bill and you realize they're charging you for every venting session you may have with them. And they're not really going to help you with coping skills. They're just going to charge you for the vent session. So I would say get a lawyer first. It's one of the things that I was very clear on. And then another thing that I fell into fairly early on in the process was meditation and mindfulness, and just being able to pull myself into the moment, because the anxiety and the stress of the divorce process, especially if it's contentious in any way, that anxiety can get away from you, and you can get pulled into the past or the future, depending on what you're worrying about. And that doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve your kids. And so, certainly learning to practice being in the moment, calming yourself down, all of those are because you'll want to be in fight or flight through the divorce process. And you just need to be able to stay calm and center yourself. Now, I don't always succeed, but it's something that it's worth practicing, and you do get better at it.
Yes. And, Candace, what did you notice first that, stress? Were you noticing like you felt very weak? You felt tired? Did you feel, because you're a mother too, like when did you notice like it was really, really getting worse with your health?
Well, this process for me has been 4 years. I mean, I'm officially divorced as of a couple of months ago, but it doesn't mean the process is over. There's still so much to go through with my particular case. And so the stress piles on, and as it does for everybody. And we're living in a world where stress is thrown at us all the time. You know, we're still dealing with this pandemic. The economic uncertainty is crazy. Climate change. I mean, you could literally just run a laundry list of daily stressors, and then you throw in, you know, personal stressors, and it's a lot. And so, you know, I'm always trying to find ways. I've read every self-help book. I've worked at meditation. I've talked to a therapist. You know, I have all kinds of little tricks and tips that I try to use. It doesn't mean I'm immune. And one of the most scary things for me was when the sort of the height of the stress was hitting in November of 2020. I started to have really extreme pain in my shoulder and across my chest and back. And it was just where all the stress was living. And I remember I was driving in the car with my boyfriend and my daughter, and I just broke down crying in the car because I was in so much pain. I couldn't catch my breath. And it seemed I just couldn't get ahead of that pain. And so that has been, I mean, I'm pain-free right now as we're sitting here talking, but that's been a very concerted effort that I've had to put into stretching, making sure I'm taking anti-inflammatory supplements to keep the inflammation down in my body, because the connection between mind and body is huge. It's proven, the science is there. So what you're mentally taking on, you are physically manifesting in your body in some way, shape, or form. So it's very important to just be aware of that, because the goal is to live beyond this experience and to remember this is a chapter, and it might be a very crappy chapter, but it's just a chapter. It's not the whole story. And you want to be healthy and strong when you get past it. So I just think that's the key, is just to always be aware of that mind-body connection and try your very best to stay healthy, because your kids want you here, your friends want you here. You know, there's lots in life that's still good, even though it might seem not so during the process. You know, you will move on beyond that.
Yes, and there's help out there, and it's okay to be vulnerable. Reach out, get a therapist, as you suggested. Also, too, your financial health. You know, you could be in debt, and you're like, oh my goodness, you have that on top of everything else. And so, reaching out to maybe a financial health expert, perhaps.
I would say absolutely. If I could go back, as a matter of fact, I would have made a lot of different decisions in regards to financial stability. I should have listened to my gut more on things, you know, but I didn't. And so I paid the price, obviously. And to be fair, I didn't anticipate that my ex would be try to be so punitive in his actions. But he was. And, you know, I recently just added up what it's cost me in lawyers' fees just a couple of days ago, because it was so depressing to think about what I had spent in lawyers' fees over the last 4 years. But I'm up and around almost $60,000. And that's what it costs to get a divorce from somebody who will not participate in the process. That's a very expensive price tag. And it also says something to the family court system that sort of allows this to happen.
Candace, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, gosh. I mean, honestly, like there's this expression that you should teach from your scars and not your wounds. And unfortunately, I'm still super wounded here. I'm starting to heal, but I'm still wounded from this whole process. So I'm not always the best to ask for advice, but I would just say, just be very clear on what your end goal is. And your end goal is, as I keep saying, is just you want to get past this healthy. That's all. You know.
Thank you so much. And to go to your podcast, listen to it, where can people go?
Well, you can search What She Said Talk with Candace Sampson on all the podcast providers, Spotify, Apple, you know it, it's all there. WhatSheSaidTalk.com is the website. LifeInPleasantville.com is my other website. And I'm all over social media. If you Google Candace Sampson, there's about 6 or 7 social platforms that I'm on. So,
Good to talk to you, and I'd like to have you come back. And
oh, thank you.
all the best. Thank you.
Some helpful advice, right, Tim?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just trying to do something, anything you can. I mean, one piece of advice from even John Stanton, who I remember, he was saying that if you have time to go for a run, even if it's 10 minutes, and this is something that I live by, just go out for that 10-minute run, because that's better than not doing a run at all. So quite often I'll just be, with that 10 minutes of time that I have in my day that I can spare, I'll be running down to the Pitt River and back and just trying to do what I can do. Even if it's only 2 kilometers, it's not much, but at least it's something.
Yes, for sure. And for me, it's like if I can get out there and walk or run for 10 minutes, it's so mental, I believe, more than just physical, I think.
There's a lot of thinking that I do when I go on these runs. So I don't know about you, Christine, but for me, I'm not running with headphones. I'm not actually listening to music. And some people think that's weird, and that's okay. For me, I actually do lots of thinking. So when I'm running along the river, I'm looking out, and I might be thinking about the beauty of where I'm running. I might be thinking about what I need to do later in the day. I might be thinking about some sort of issue I'm dealing with, whatever it might be. I find the running is actually a great time to mentally escape in some ways, and also get some thinking done that you need to do.
And before we go, where can people check you out or follow you?
Absolutely. At Tim James City, Twitter and Instagram. You can check on things, as I'll be updating, of course, my progress with the recovery, doing my first half marathon in a few years, and then also trying to motivate my wife to do her first half marathon ever. So that'll be something that I'm documenting. Again, Twitter, Instagram, at Tim James City.
Yeah, so get out there and run with that. And I want to thank you very much for being a guest on the show, and I love for you to come back.
Absolutely. I look forward to being back, and hopefully this time it's not a few years in between. So let's do it again sooner.
Yes, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Run With It is sponsored by Mallory's Fashion Network, The Rio Theatre, Craft Hair Academy, and the Vancouver Sun Run presented by Cal Tire. And the Sun Run is happening on April 16th. Run or walk the event.